Well, you'll be happy to know that I did finish the book, by the way.
Oh, good, yeah.
Because otherwise we wouldn't be having a
Right,
podcast.
yeah. I was super surprised at how quick I listened to it. I did not expect to go through it that quickly.
I finished it at breakfast this morning.
Oh, still.
The problem was I realized that after I finished breakfast, I basically sat at Jonathan's with basically my hands folded, staring out a window, listening to the book finished. So basically, the waitstaff would just pass by me like as I'm just staring blankly out a window for like 2 hours, which I'm so glad that this waitstaff is not making money off of tips, because otherwise I would have just like cost them so much money. Welcome to My Hill to Die On, episode 27.
Everyone has things they are passionate about.
Things we want our friends to try and experience.
So we've convinced each other to try different things.
And we talk about these experiences to see if we can get just one more person
to join us on our hill to die on. I'll break this on you now.
Okay.
Another reason why my weekend has been a bit busy is that yesterday I came home. My kids were watching some TV. I had finished compressing a show, and I wanted to put it up on my server. So I went to connect. Wasn't connecting. I was like, that's weird. Checked my network. No, I didn't, VPN or anything weird even if I VPN, it should still connect, but it still wasn't connecting. So then I went over to take a look, and it was on. I went to my Mac Mini server, which is always connected to my Synology, and my Mac Mini server had said it had disconnected. It's like,
Okay.
I looked in my email history, and I hadn't received the successful backup emails that I get every evening. And I was like, it crashed. So I went over and shut it off. I couldn't log into the Synology interface, so I just pushed the power button. You can hold the power button for a few seconds, and it will do a proper shutdown on the Synology itself. If you just hold it for a few seconds, the blue light will start blinking, and then it'll shut down.
Yeah.
It'll do its proper shutdown procedure. So I pushed the blue button for a few seconds. It blinked and blinked and blinked and never shut down. Like, it'll do it after like 30 seconds to a minute, something like that. Like, it's not short, but it's not 10 minutes long, like was what I was waiting for. And I was like, oh no. So I said, whatever is caught up in the system is caught up in the system. So then I held the power button down until it shut down. But ever since then, I have not yet gotten it to boot. Now, I haven't tried a lot yet because I've been very busy. Trying right then, it did not boot again yet. And now I'm very scared for my Synology. I don't know where I am yet. What I did find, when I first tried to turn it on again after that, the blue button would blink, but then nothing else would happen. None of the drive lights would come on. None of the status lights would come on. Looking up on the internet, that's like a very bad thing. That's like a motherboard failure. I was like, ooh, okay, nervous. Shut it off again after waiting, 10, 20 minutes. Then did it again. All the drive lights turned on. Green, I think. It's hard to tell because usually you can compare green and yellow against the drive light that's next to it. But they look to be all green, I think. And then the alert light started blinking. And looking that up on the internet, it says, generally speaking, that's a fan failure. Now, reaching to the back, my Synology is pretty high up on a shelf. Reaching to the back, I thought I felt air coming out of both fans. So that was interesting. So I figured the next step was to just blow all the dust out because it's, it's dusty. It's fairly dusty. So I was like, well, let's see if we can fix the fan. So this morning, I biked to school, got some compressed air. And then later this afternoon, I blew all the air out. I blew all the dirt out, but then I had to go to the cross-country meet, so I didn't get any further than that. So I'm pretty worried, but I'm wondering if just blowing all the dust out will have the correct effect. So I'm still hopeful.
Gotcha.
But, I'm worried because the school's Synology, which is the same age as mine, had the motherboard failure last school year. And because we bought the Synologies from America, we had a really hard time getting it back to America for warranty repair. They're like, normally we'll just send you a new one, and then you put the old one in the box and send it back, and you're good to go. But because you're in Japan, you have to send it to us first, and then we'll send you a new one, and we're not going to pay for shipping. You have to pay for shipping. So it's like, fine, we'll pay for shipping. We argued over shipping methods. They sent us 3 of their preferred methods, and all of them were super expensive. The cost of a whole nother Synology, so it's like, no way, we're not spending that much in shipping.
Yeah.
So we found a shipper that would do it for cheaper. I mean, it would take longer, but whatever. It was fine for what we needed. So we shipped it off finally. And then it came back to us. It took forever, but then it came back. They said they didn't receive it. And we're like, oh, that's weird. And it finally came back to us. And we had put the address in as Synology had gave us. And they said that there was nobody there. And they shipped it back to us. And then we complained to Synology. We're like, what did you guys do? This is your address. Like, why are they saying no one was there? So finally they said, well, no, you're going to have to pay for it to ship it again. Or they are like, oh, we'll give you another address. But I'm like, yeah, we're not paying for this again. So what we ended up doing was, by that time it had been a few months and we were approaching Christmas break. And we're like, fine. One of our staff members was willing to bring it to America in their luggage and have Synology pick it up for free. And then we paid for Synology to send it back to school. But yikes, that was super frustrating. And I'm afraid that this is the situation we're going to be in. But the cost of even what the school paid for all that shipping was probably, like a third the cost of another Synology. So it still wasn't great. We still paid for a lot of shipping. And I don't want to pay that much shipping for this. I mean, my Synology is only 3 years old. I really was hoping that this would last as a backup. I was kind of actually hoping that I wasn't hoping to buy a new one yet. As much as I want to buy a new one, I don't need a new one. This one's working fine up until now. And I was hoping that if I did need a new one, that this would become the backup one. But even then, I don't need a new one. This is working just fine. Well, it was working just fine. So we'll have to see what happens. But I don't want to buy a new Synology. That's not what I want to be doing. So
I understand.
I do feel confident that my data is backed up. I have 2 backup Synologies that I have confident that have my data. So I'm not worried about my data. The problem I have with my Synology right now is I wish I could redo my disks. Yeah, because of the way I've been replacing them, some of my space is lost. And I'd rather take a 1 terabyte drive out and leave it empty to have a drive bay empty. But I can't do that now because I've filled up all my drive bays. So it would almost be a blessing if my disk array dies and I have to reformat. I mean, in the fact that that's what I actually want to do, but I'm not looking forward to restoring all my data, that's for sure. So, I mean, it's possible. And if I was to do it, I would have, see, here's the other thing. I can't quite just buy a 12 terabyte drive because I think I have like 13 terabytes on my Synology. So if I could buy a 13 terabyte drive, back up all my stuff to that, then erase it and redo it, I'd rather do it that way, but I can't quite do that. Plus, a 14 terabyte drive is so expensive. Again, it's like the cost of half of a Synology right there. So, and what am I going to do with it in the end? So back to I can't even just get your recordings off. There's an amazing amount of things that it's like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, we can't do that. At least it's not crippling my household right now, but yikes.
Oh, that's right. That means that the sharing of the...
Yeah, you can't even send me your file. We're going to have to go back to airdropping your file to me after this because you can't even share it with me. Yep.
But you still have the most recent episode that I sent you,
right?
Yeah,
because it's on my iPad.
Because it's on your iPad. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, my mind went to, oh no.
Well, and all of those files are in the backup, so I'm not worried about it. And the last email I got was everything was 100% backed up, and I hadn't saved any files since that last email. Like I don't put things on my Synology every day. So the email I got Thursday night said that everything was 100% backed up.
So you have your Synology, and then you have your Synology backed up
to 2 different Synologies.
To 2 other different Synologies.
Yeah. I'm not worried about my data. I'm worried about the unit.
Gotcha. All right. I'm gonna try to stay off of politics, because
it's gonna be depressing from here on.
Well, it's always depressing. The problem is, first of all, now this is coming from an American who lives abroad. So many of America's problems with our current political system would be solved with one change. And it would be to make all of our voting systems into a ranked voting system.
Mm-hmm.
It would force multiple parties to work together. It would probably institute other parties cropping up because it wouldn't be a first-past-the-post system. So you would end up with coalition governments rather than just 2 parties. It would solve so many issues because it would force people to get out of the Republican, Democrat, us versus them mentality. and it would solve a lot of issues, either doing a ranked voting system or a system where you would split the seats between a vote for a person through a ranked vote system and then a vote for the party, so that you could give better representation to what people actually want. Because then your votes would go to, you would be voting for what you want, not voting against what you don't want.
Mm. Yeah, actually, my daughter asked me the other day, why did Japan get a prime minister so quickly after Abe stepped down? And I said, well, because the party's in power, so they just put their next best man in the chair. And, in thinking about that as I was saying that, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if the parties didn't pick a man who was electable, but a man who would do a good job?
Well, the thing about Japan's system is, since it's a parliamentary system, it is whoever the people have voted into the majority in parliament, they choose whoever they want.
And he can be somebody who they think will do. Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're picking somebody who they think will do a good job.
They can pick whoever they think is going to be a good job, or whoever they think will be a great scapegoat.
Yeah, or the best puppet, maybe. Yeah.
Or the best face. Because really, if the parliament and the party have picked the prime minister, it could just be that they want somebody to be the face of what they're trying to do.
Which is what, who's that female British prime minister that just went through? She was the best face for the Brexit, right? I mean...
that's what they thought.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the current guy has no good face. No, sorry, just kidding.
The current guy has...
His hair's all messed up.
Well, the current guy, he was part of the group that had campaigned to get Brexit pushed through with some slightly deceitful, and I say slightly deceitful because I'm downplaying it because I don't want to sound too biased, but it was outright lies. He did things that deceived the public, that just straight up deceived the public to try to get Brexit pushed through. And now he's prime minister.
Yep.
Oh, what can I say? Politics can drive a man to drink.
So, I mean, Japan is pretty similar to Britain's system, correct? Yeah.
Very much. Because where Japan and Great Britain have prime ministers, because the role of head of state and head of government are split into two different things.
Right, because of the emperor.
Emperor and queen are both the head of state, which is your figurehead, your representation of your country to the rest of the world. Whereas the head of government is your prime minister, the person who basically is running the day-to-day stuff.
So have you looked much at Korea's system?
I've looked into it a bit, but not as much as I could have.
Because one of the interesting things I find is that the public has a lot of sway on the president. Now, the public might have a lot of sway because the houses, whatever they're called, and I don't know what they're called in the Korean system, but the houses do what the public says, actually.
What's that like?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to imagine. Because interestingly, Korea just had its first woman president recently. And it was going well until, of course, it was going well to the end, until it came crashing down on her. And she got under the public's skin very badly for some actions she made. Well, throughout the course of her presidency, unfortunately. It was just uncovered all at once. But very quickly after it was uncovered, she got pushed out. Now, I'm very skimming over what all happened because I don't know a lot. I just know that something like that happened. But she was pushed out. Like it moved from, we've already impeached this president and he's still in office, right? She was out in a matter of 2 weeks. And I don't know how that happened, but how come we can't do that? Sorry.
I think it's probably because... first of all, their house, they only have one National Assembly.
Okay.
It's a unicameral system.
Okay. So they don't have two houses.
They don't have two houses.
So they can get that house to do... They can get... if the house is listening to the public at all, they can move things along.
And it also depends on how are the votes, because my guess is, based on what you just described, Oh, actually, they have two major parties and then a bunch of smaller parties.
You were going to guess more parties?
I was going to guess more parties and they had to work in a coalition.
Mm-mm.
But the Democratic Party actually has a simple majority.
And I don't know what happened because I'm sure that the replacement president wasn't her vice president. Like, I'm pretty sure there must have been an election. So they must have the ability to call an election after that woman either was pushed out or maybe she stepped down. But I mean, she was like, and again, probably because she's at least somewhat wise. I mean, she seemed to be pretty wise until this all came out. She might have stepped down instead of being completely pushed out.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I'm looking at a map of their political structure.
Oh, okay.
They have a very interesting thing because they have a president and a prime minister.
Oh, okay. Is the prime minister above the leader of the house or something?
So, here, let me see if I can't.
Yeah, put this in the notes. Oh, it's a direct election.
So, the thing is, though, the people vote for the president and the National Assembly directly, and then the president will elect the prime minister.
Oh, and the Supreme Court has the ability to impeach the president.
Yep. Which means that the National Assembly isn't the one who does all the impeachment stuff. It's the Supreme Court. But because of this structure, it probably means that it's at least quasi-semi-presidential, which means that the power is mostly shared between the president, National Assembly, and the prime minister. But again, I don't know enough about their system to quite say that specifically. But it's very interesting. Every year I have a project where I have my students investigate a different, I break the students into different countries and they have to investigate different countries, give me all the information that we've learned in class about politics from the perspective of that country. This is actually the first year that one of the students chose South Korea, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they say.
So I had one more opening-ish topic.
Okay.
And that is Apple One. So we are not a news show, but we do like talking about tech every once in a while, right? The biggest thing for me from that announcement, because again, I'm not buying another Apple Watch. I have enough Apple Watches. The iPad was nice, and I think I've already recommended that you buy it if you can find the money under your couch cushions.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing was the Apple One subscription. I think that is unbelievable. I was expecting Apple to be at least $10 more on each of their tiers because I thought that whatever Apple announces as a bundle will be too much for me because I don't subscribe to enough services. But I was amazed that I'm actually considering this bundle, and I probably will sign up for it right away. Whether I stay subscribed is another thing, but I think right away I'll sign up because I do already pay for the 2 terabytes of storage because I have a family with a lot of phones and a lot of pictures. I do already pay for the family iTunes plan, and I've been enjoying Apple TV and looking forward to some of the shows that are coming out, so I probably will still pay for that. What I was guessing I was going to do was cancel and then subscribe every few months or something like that, and just pay for every few months here and there. But my wife loved Apple News. When we subscribed to Apple News for the first summer it was available, and my wife loved it, but she realized that she didn't want to pay $10 a month for it. And my kids, even though I had put it on my kids' phones and downloaded age-appropriate magazines for them on their phones, they never looked at it. So my wife felt like that we shouldn't be paying $10 a month for something that only she is enjoying. Even though she enjoyed it, she couldn't rationalize it in her head. What was the other one? The Apple Fitness thing looks interesting. Oh, and Apple Arcade. My daughters ask me for new games on their phone all the time. And they're like, Dad, look, I saw this game on a YouTube ad and I think we should get it. And I'm like, oh, games on YouTube ads. Yeah, that's going to be a winner right there.
Yeah, well, the problem with games on YouTube ads is 9 times out of 10, they're just cash grabs.
I know, exactly. So I did teach my oldest daughter, I said, take a look. What is the way it makes money, right? It's a free game. Look at the in-app purchases. Are you buying coins? Yeah, so she's, oh, I can see it's a coins game. I'm like, yeah, okay, then we're not getting that game. So then she's like, well, look, this one's only a remove ads, so that means it's probably okay, right? I'm like, yeah, sometimes. But if Apple Arcade is thrown in there too, then I can just have my kids download whatever games are on Apple Arcade. So, because they're not going to do cash grabs and stuff like that. So,
because Apple Arcade generally is pretty curated.
Yes. While I wouldn't sign up for it outright in the past, now I feel like I'm going to be paying for storage. I'm going to be paying for Apple Music. And in the last $5, so I probably will get the $30 a month plan, and I'm already paying $25 a month with those first two. And with the last $5, I'll be getting Apple TV, Apple Arcade, and Apple News. And I think all of those three things together are worth $5 a month to me. None of them are worth $5 a month to me on their own, but altogether I think they are worth $5 a month to me. So I'm actually kind of excited about that.
Sounds good to me. I look at it and go, the version I would get, probably if I did this, would be, I would probably do the individual.
Yeah. Yeah, would you do that first one?
I would do that first one, the individual, where it's music, the TV Plus, arcade, and 50 gigabytes of iCloud. Because I cannot convince myself to pay $10 extra a month for News and Fitness Plus and the extra cloud storage space.
Yeah. If you're not using it, then yeah.
No, I'm not using it. I have Google Drive for most of my things, and then I have a few things that are stored in Dropbox. But the space that I use in Dropbox is small enough that I get by on the free version of Dropbox. I don't need extra space because what's stored on my Dropbox is a couple Scrivener files and my games database. And neither of those things takes up very much space.
Not until you start putting like big PDFs in your database, but you're not going to do that yet. So
yeah, I'm not putting PDFs in my games database.
Yeah, you'll be fine then.
The largest thing that is in there is small pictures.
So I think that's a good plan for you.
Now here's the other thing. I've been wrestling with whether I want to keep paying for Apple Music.
Okay.
Or if I want to just use Spotify.
Okay. What do you see that in Spotify that you would... Are you going to switch, or you have both already?
I have both.
Oh, okay.
Spotify is just... It's a different way to access certain music. And some music that they put on Spotify isn't on Apple Music, and some music that's on Apple Music isn't on Spotify. And I don't pay for Spotify. I use the free version of that.
Oh, okay.
You just have to deal with the ads.
I'm too tied into Apple Music.
For me, it's the fact that I look at it and go, well, I don't pay for Spotify, and for the music that I use Apple Music for, could I access it using the free Spotify? That's the question.
You feel like you can?
I'm questioning. I haven't made my decision yet simply because I am very tied into Apple Music.
And I think you can still sign into iTunes Match if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And I liked that service. And I didn't switch to Apple Music for quite a while, and I stayed with iTunes Match, and I really liked that. So.
Yep. Either way, I need to curate my library a bit better because I've just been throwing things in my library and it's not very well organized, and that annoys me to no end. But I'll talk about that stuff later.
Okay.
Because I think that ties into tasks very well.
Oh, yes. Do you want to do a game corner?
Yeah. The game corner for this week. I decided that this time I'm going to go to an oldie but a goodie.
Okay.
Because I think that it is time that I tell you my favorite Final Fantasy.
Okay. 22. It's going to be 22.
No, there's not 22 of them. Well, technically there might actually...
There might be 22 of them with remakes and re-releases and all that.
Well, if you're counting remakes and re-releases, there's definitely above 22.
And what do you call them? Downloadable thingies.
Oh, the downloadable content? Yeah, no. All that to say, there is always a debate on what is the best Final Fantasy. Many people will say it's 7, many people will say it's 8, many people will say 9, some people say it's 10. Nobody says it's... I'm just kidding. I'm going to stop myself before I say something that will get 7 rabid fans chasing me down. But I'm going to say my absolute favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy VI.
Okay.
Which in America was originally released as Final Fantasy III. because the numbering system got a little funky with ones that didn't get released in America in the age of the SNES. Final Fantasy VI is a wonderful story that originally came out on the Super Nintendo and has been re-released a couple of times, but my favorite version, the version that is in a special place in my heart, is that SNES version.
Mm.
But part of the thing behind it is the fact that that story is just, it is a beautiful story. The characters are well developed, and the world is just built up in a way that is just, it is epic. So the basic plot is there are all these characters who are fighting against the Empire. And the Empire is trying to use magical creatures called espers to basically use their magic mixed with technology to take over the world.
Okay.
And the main characters of the story are all trying to fight against that, including one of the main characters, the starting character that you work with, who is half human and half esper, half of this magical creature. Like, her father was an esper, her mother was a human.
Mm.
And she spent most of her life as a slave to the Empire because she was being mind controlled the entire time.
Mm.
So, beginning of the story, she breaks out of that mind control and joins with this group that end up fighting against the Empire. One of the things that makes this story so great is you're fighting against the Empire mostly for the first half of the story. Because at about the halfway mark, there is a character named Kefka. And this is going to be a whole lot of spoilers. So if you do not want to hear Final Fantasy VI spoilers from a game from 1994, go ahead and skip ahead now.
You mean if you have an SNES and you were to go buy it and then play it?
There are other releases.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I have a couple of copies on various systems of this game.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so one of the villains, his name is Kefka, ends up betraying the Empire and betraying the Emperor himself, actually. And there's a whole bunch of things, but he ends up destroying the world. So the midpoint of the game is him destroying the world. Kind of. He ends up breaking apart a lot of the world, many people die, and he takes the place as basically a god emperor of the world, ruling over everything. And so the second half of the story is all of your characters who largely are hopeless at this point because they watched the world be destroyed. They watched a lot of their friends die, and yet the world is still being ruled over by this maniacal clown. Because Kefka is largely shown as a jester throughout most of the story. He is an insane clown.
But he's only introduced halfway through, so who's the evil?
No, he is actually introduced right at the beginning.
Oh, sorry.
But his betrayal is halfway through the game.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, sorry.
So he destroys the world halfway through the game, and then the other half of the world is fighting against Kefka and trying to basically, in some way, bring some sense of peace back to the world.
Mm.
Some of the things that are wonderful about this game, there are just some really beautiful set pieces. There's an opera scene where you're trying to recruit this one character and get him to help out so you can use his airship. And so one of your characters has to pretend to be an opera singer. It's this very emotional scene, but it is also one of those things that makes you realize how fine a craftsman the musicians working on this game were, because they can bring out so much emotion in the limited amount of music available through bit music, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It is a wonderful story, lots of well-built characters, a world that is very good, very, very strong and very well-built world, and all of the characters, every single one of the characters is broken in some way.
Mm.
They grow and they become, they're great characters.
Mm-hmm. Right. So they all have their own arcs.
They all have their own arcs. I mean, some of them less so than others. Some of them are basically, there is a couple of characters who are essentially optional characters, but have somewhat of a story.
Mm.
And what other game allows you to suplex a train? There, at one point you do fight a train, and one of your characters has the ability to suplex the train. other really great scenes, and I'm only going to list one more great scene from this game, is so one of the characters, his name is Cyan, a loyal knight of Kingdom of Doma, and Kefka poisons the water of Doma. And all of his friends and family, including his wife and child, all die because Kefka poisoned the water. And a little bit later, he is going through this forest and finds the train that I was talking about. And the train is actually the train that takes the souls of the dead into the afterlife. And so the scene where you see Cyan basically chasing after this train, and he sees his son and his wife on this train as it goes off into the forest after he had just, with his friends, beat up the train. Like I said, it is amazing to see what they did with the amount of emotion and storytelling that could be done through essentially a Super Famicom game. And it is one of those stories that, regardless of how much time has passed, still sticks in my mind and is why, in my opinion, it is still the best Final Fantasy.
I can see why it's your favorite.
Yeah. They tried making a remake of it using more up-to-date graphics, and it didn't capture the same feel because they made them all cel-shaded and...
Oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so because you changed the graphics, you changed the feel of the game.
Mm-hmm. If they were going to make a full remake, they should have gone for gritty or realistic instead of cel-shaded.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
If they were going to make a remake, they should have gone full Final Fantasy VII remake style, where they actually make the characters realistic. That's my opinion. But instead, they went for a smaller jump, which was more cel-shaded, and it didn't work, in my opinion. But it's still a fantastic and amazing story, to the point where regularly when I'm coding, the soundtrack of that game is one of the soundtracks that I will listen to while I am coding.
All right, so Ryan, what do we have today? None of us brought this.
Yeah, so a coworker of ours who listens to our podcast mentioned that he had access to a specific drink that he wanted us to try on the podcast. So he gave us 2 bottles of what is called wasabi ginger ale.
Mm-hmm. But what's wasabi, Ryan?
What is wasabi? Wasabi is a plant. Oh, do you want me to go into more detail than that?
Have you seen Cars 2 at all?
No, I have not seen Cars 2.
It's good. You can spare yourself some of the pain. The third one's better than the second, but it's not a high bar. Anyway, in Cars 2, Mater, you've seen Cars 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Mater is following Lightning McQueen on his world tour, and they take a stop in Japan. So Mater drives up to the sushi bar and says, "Oh, look, pistachio ice cream."
Oh, no.
So, of course, they give him the tiny scoop, right? And he's like, "That's all the ice cream you get? I would like a scoop," right? So then he gets them to give him a scoop, and he puts the whole thing in his mouth. And, of course, it causes a scene. He said, and then he goes up to the whole audience. I forget the exact line, but he's like, "Don't eat the pistachio ice cream. It has turned." Anyway.
Well, wasabi,
sorry,
for those who don't know then, is a plant of the family that includes horseradish, mustard, and other types of
spiciness,
things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Wasabi is quite spicy.
A paste is usually made as a condiment for sushi to give it a zing, if you will.
Mm-hmm. I do like it in sushi. I do like it a lot.
Oh, I love wasabi on my sushi. It's used as a general spice in a lot of Japanese cooking, I think.
Yeah. It's good.
But, that being said, it is a spice put into ginger ale.
Yeah, mm-hmm. That'll be interesting because ginger is its own.
Yeah.
I guess, is ginger a spice?
Ginger
Ginger
is a spice, I would think.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I would define it as a spice.
It's definitely a flavor, that's for sure. So actually, that's an interesting question. Some ginger in ginger ale is kind of weak, but some ginger ales are much more stronger in their ginger flavor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious as to what this is going to be in terms of ginger and how it mixes wasabi with that.
Yeah, I'm very curious on that. So basically, our coworker said, "Hey, you should try this."
hey, this looks weird. You'd like it.
Yeah, basically. Hey, you'll drink anything, right? So yeah, we have this wasabi ginger ale. It is 240 milliliters, which I know you love.
Yeah, At least it's not in a bottle that looks like it should be 500 milliliters, right? It's in a special. This is actually a glass bottle.
Mhm.
It's kind of a nice bottle.
Yeah.
But at least it's not like faking out, like, oh, look, this is a 500 milliliter bottle.
Apparently, this was purchased via Amazon.jp.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Asked where they got it, and that was the response.
Alrighty, let's give it a taste.
All right,
huh?
let's see how much I regret. I feel like I'm gonna regret this so much. Ooh, that's got some spice.
Smells very ginger.
Yeah.
It is not bad.
No,
There's not much wasabi. Actually, it's heavier on the ginger, I think.
I think it's got a heavy ginger taste. Oh, if you get a big drink,
Mhm.
I think the wasabi kicks in if you get a bigger drink. You know how your tongue has different places where different tastes are?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think I tasted the wasabi the most on the outer edges of my tongue.
It's just like a hint of wasabi.
Yeah.
It is not strong, but the ginger is pretty good.
Yeah.
I am not disappointed in the ginger.
No,
It's strong, but it is not.
it's not to the point where you regret everything.
Yeah.
Because normally a spicy ginger is so spicy that you feel like you can't drink the whole bottle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because I've had a couple of ginger ales that I've bought that I just had to pour out because I just couldn't deal with it. But no, I feel like the wasabi kind of balances it out a bit.
Like it adds a different kick.
Yeah, they're both kicks, but because they're together, it doesn't make it oppressive.
Mm-hmm. Which is funny, right?
Yeah.
2 kicks together is not oppressive, right? It like spreads it out somehow.
Yeah. Now, if I were to go out and buy a drink, I probably would not be buying it.
Probably not.
Simply because it's not my normal choice of flavor. It's all right. It's good.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be good for a party kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it'd be good for a party, but if I'm just going to sit around and have something to drink, this isn't going to be it.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'd give it a 6 maybe.
That sounds about right. I was trying to determine where I would put it, but I think 6 is about right.
6 out of 10.
Yeah, I think 6.
I don't know. I actually kind of like the kick.
You know, I understand that. For me, I think it's the fact that normally when I drink something, I want to be refreshed.
Mm.
This is not the type of drink that you would drink for refreshment. This is a type of drink that I feel you would drink for flavor.
For flavor, yeah.
Because I feel like I'm actually thirstier after drinking it.
Yeah, a little bit maybe. Yeah, I think you might be able to talk me into a 7, but I think 6 or 7, but maybe leaning on the 6 end. So 6.5.
I think I'm feeling a 6.
It's good.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
I was anticipating like a 2.
I was anticipating the wasabi to be super strong, which it is not.
No, it's just, it's present, but it's not strong.
I almost want to taste what this tastes like regular ginger ale, just to compare, because I feel like the wasabi is fairly weak. Adds, but is weak.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming if I tasted a regular one, then I would for sure taste the wasabi in the next sip.
Probably.
Anyway, interesting.
Yeah.
Made in Shizuoka.
Well, maybe if you go there, they will provide you with the regular version. Small road trip.
When we get sponsored.
Yeah, you know, you got to work on all those sponsorship deals.
Drink sponsorships, actually, not a bad idea. After these messages.
After this message from Wasabi Ginger Ale. As the book that we're going to talk about deals a lot with the importance of tasks and purpose, we felt like it would be important for us to talk about some of, if not our favorite tasks, some of the ones that we find interesting or fun.
We left this pretty wide open here.
Yeah.
This is tasks you could have chosen or tasks you could have been assigned to. Could have been a bunch of things here, but I think we left this pretty wide open, and hopefully it'll make it more interesting.
Yeah. So do you want to begin?
It was interesting to think about tasks again in its wide openness, because I think that I am one that doesn't really like tasks and have a hard time seeing tasks that need to be done. My eyes just don't seem to catch it. My wife tells me of a lot of things that I'm just completely missing, and then I'm always wondering, how did I miss that? Yeah, should have done that. So I'm very bad at house tasks. I can say that right off the bat. And then my wife was, how do you know what to do next in the computer program? How come you don't know what to do next in the house? And I don't have a good answer for that one yet. Still working on that. Yeah, I was like, good question. It's not because of training. I mean, I guess it could be because of training, but there's other things involved there too. There's other attention-y things. There's other attention-related things involved there. But anyway, I am somebody who doesn't like repetitive things, generally also. In my job, I do find that I often will, spend hours programming something to do it for me each time, as opposed to doing the menial task or repetitive task. So I'm going to pick here compressing videos that I've recorded off TV. And the reason that I'm picking it is because I am very surprised that this is something that is completely repetitive, but I do it every time. There's no programming involved here. I'm doing it all manually. I'm, getting the recording. I am cutting out the ads, popping it into the metadata editor, sticking it up on my server, refreshing all the interfaces on my server, and letting it go. Well, when my server's working, that is. But it's completely manual. I do every single task in there. I don't have any automated naming scheme that pulls the names from the metadata thing. I do it all manually, and I don't know why, right? Why is this something that I can do manually? It surprises me when there are things that I do like that. And this is something I just enjoy. And maybe it is because it's moving these shows through a procedure, right? And I like moving things through a procedure maybe. But this is a task I do. Like all of the shows I capture, I generally watch them once. I don't repeat them too often. The shows I record for my daughters, they'll often watch them a few times. So people collect things to collect them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if that's kind of why I'm doing this. I don't often sit back and how many do I have now? What's my collection like? I rarely do that. So I'm not really collecting it to collect. I'm not looking at my collection and saying, wow, look at all these things I've collected. I rarely do that. So I think I just like moving the things through the process. So it's a task that I've picked for myself. It's a chosen task. It's not something anyone's assigned to me. But it is something that I like to do. And it's just kind of funny to me that I like to do this.
All right. Well, for the first task that I'm going to pick is actually going to be something, I would say, of a similar vein, but not the same. And for me, it's going to be organization.
Okay.
Specifically, I enjoy organizing data.
Okay.
I don't necessarily like organizing in, say, real life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this thing should definitely be in this drawer. That's not how my brain works. But you give me a list of movies or games or my books or things like that. I love making lists and spreadsheets of that nature. It is just so calming. Yes, I am talking about the glory of spreadsheets here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have recreational spreadsheets?
I do have basically a recreational spreadsheet. You might have heard me mention my database before of my games. That is essentially a recreational spreadsheet.
That's true. I would say that. Mm-hmm.
Because what I am doing is I am organizing bits of information about things that I have just so that I can keep track of them. And it is just something so relaxing about that. Before I had that, I would regularly make lists about things. Or if I'm not making a list, because I would move things in my house a lot, I cannot tell you how many times I spent afternoons alphabetizing things.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was my bookshelves or my DVD collection, when those were the thing. But I would just regularly organize things, and then maybe a couple of months down the line might think to myself, I think it would work better if I reorganize them, not by the first letter of their title, if it was a TV series shelf, not by the title of the specific thing, but by the TV series that they're all a part of. And so I would reorganize things and move things around because I had thought of some new organizational style. But yeah, I find organizing things in lists very calming, very relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if only I could do this in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I can tell you that my living room, I moved into this apartment, 3-4 months ago now?
Mm-hmm.
4 months ago now, I think. And I still have things that I meant to deal with within the first week of me having moved in here that are still just sitting in a corner of my living room because I apparently could not be bothered to take it downstairs or get rid of it in some way. So, yeah, if only I could organize better in real life rather than just in spreadsheets and lists.
Yeah.
Because spreadsheets and lists, oof, that's where the action's at.
Yeah, piles on my desk have grown again. I hate that. I hate paper.
Oh, yeah, I've gotten rid of most of my paper.
Mm.
Although the problem is every time I move and throw away paper, I realize how many coffee stains I have on my desk.
Good one.
All right.
For my second one, I think this might be too broad, but there's a lot of things that go with it. But I think I'm going to pick cross country. Is that fair?
All right. As the only person who is viable to be the judge in this occasion, I'll allow it.
Thank you. Because I like the coaching and the organization. I think we are similar in this way, but there's a lot of stuff to organize in cross country. I've made the joke to you that I have a cross country database that I have, built by hand over many years. And now I've worked on this parsing database a few times. But I will spend an inordinate amount of time to save 5 minutes, to save 30 seconds on a meet day or 5 minutes on a meet day, right? Like I will spend hours looking at the code, especially in the chip parsing database. I will spend hours looking at that code. How can I get it to run a bit faster? How can I get it to run a bit faster? How can I get it to run a bit faster? Because I want to have a meet, do all the organizing as quick as possible. In fact, during normal meets, when we would go to the American base, my goal would be to finish all of the scoring by the time we reached the school and have it then posted that quickly. That is my goal. And most of the time I got there. And of course, because of circumstances, there would always be a kid that didn't have a chip or whatever that I would need to look back onto the video. But I would wait to do that on, Sunday if I had time, or Monday to, take a few minutes off of school and do it on Monday. So there's a lot of organizing that I do, and I like to do that. And it did start in college when I would help the college coach and help him organize meets in college. And it was a lot of fun. So then I just kept doing it as I was assistant coach here at our school for a few years and then took over as head coach. So I do like all of that organizing.
Sounds good to me.
There's been a few changes this season because of the current climate that we're in.
You mean the world is different because there's a pandemic that we have to worry about?
Yes. But interestingly, so things are returning more to normal, but it's still different. And one of the other interesting things is the changes we've made because of the pandemic are understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing that changed for me this season was that we have a new athletic director, and it's just different. It's not bad. Our new athletic director is great, and he's helped me out a lot this season, especially with all the changes with COVID. But it is amazing to me to look back now and realize how much a rhythm I was in with the previous because the previous athletic director had been here for 15 years, right? Ever since I started coaching cross country. He was the head coach of cross country when I arrived. I took it over from him 4 years in, the head coaching, and I still worked with him as he was AD, so I still worked in that capacity. And we just got into a rhythm, right? Boom, boom, boom. We knew exactly what each other wanted. We knew exactly the conversations we were going to have, where things were in his office. I mean, silly things, but still, like, we had it down, right? Just the changes with the new AD are, it's just like, oh, I have to tell him that because he doesn't know. Like, I didn't. How's he going to know? The only way he would know is if I had to tell him, right? Like, he's just like, oh yeah, I got to make sure I tell him. There's so many things like that. It's like, he's not doing anything wrong. I just got to make sure I'm communicating well now. And again, as soon as I communicate, things are smooth. Like there's no problems. It's just I have to remember.
It's just that he doesn't have the ability to read your mind.
He doesn't. No, he doesn't. Right? And like, so for instance, we have the chip timing system in cross country, which I want to get into in a minute here. But we have the chip timing system in cross country, and our school, as the holder of the system, collect all the chips back from all the schools. Now, all the schools own their own chips, but we feel it's probably safer, since we're actually keeping the system in our school, that we'll just collect everything back and put it all together. That way, if an AD changes at another school, they don't lose, they're like, oh, what are these things? Oh, we'll just toss them. That it's all together in one place. And then we return them to all the schools in September, first thing at the first AD meeting. Now, of course, the first AD meeting is not in person this year. Normally it's in person. But even still, I didn't tell him at the first AD meeting that we had to talk about the chips. So then I remembered, so then I saw him, I was like, oh, goodness, you already had your first meeting, didn't you? Ooh, next year, we'll have to talk about the chip timings next time. And we had to mail the chips off to all the schools, which again, not terrible. But as soon as I told him that, he was right on top of it. Like, he got it all organized. He got the chips all mailed off. Like, I didn't have to do anything. So it's just me remembering to not expect that things are in the same place, because he cleaned up a lot of stuff, which is great. It is now more organized, but of course, I don't know where everything is. So I go in expecting to find my cones, and I'm like, oh, Stink, you cleaned them up. Where did you put them? Like, it's not a problem. I just need to know, where did you put? Oh, okay, they're over here now. Got it. He did seem to toss away a whole bunch of old watches, which is probably good. He's like, yeah, you'll have to buy new ones. And I'm like, oh, I'll have to buy new ones. Gave me a chance to think, oh, actually, I'd rather wrist type watches instead of stopwatch type watches, because kids hate holding the stopwatch type watches when they're running. But if you buy wrist type watches, then they'll just wear them, and then they won't have to think about holding them. He got 4 wrist type ones, and they're great. Anyway, things are great. It's just amazing. Like, I came down the second day of practice, and I was like, oh, Stink, where's my watches? He's like, oh, yeah, I think I tossed those. It's like, oh, no problem. Those are the hilarious things. Nothing has been a problem. I've been the problem, if anything, because I forget to tell him things.
You?
Yeah, me. Oh, so cross country. Our league does things differently than most leagues. Generally speaking, we run in the same location every weekend, which doesn't feel like cross country to me. Running cross country in high school, you'd go to a different place every week, right? Just like basketball, right? You'd go to a different home court every week. You'd go to their school, they'd come to your school, blah, 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 right? Cross country was pretty similar. So you'd go to their course, they'd come to your course. Everybody would go to each other's courses. So we run every week at a local American military facility, which is very nice. It's a humongous park in the middle of Tokyo. You don't even feel like you're in Tokyo, because you feel like you're in the woods, which the Boy Scouts used to their advantage. But with the pandemic, the American military is, of course, panicking. So they closed all their facilities to visitors completely. Even military personnel can't bring on visitors at all. So there's no way that we can get to this base in this time. So we're like, oh, okay, we have to schedule other things. And scheduling places in Japan is a pain in the neck. There's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape, especially because they don't know what we're doing. So we talked to a few parks. They're all like, no. So instead of running at parks, one of the things we can easily get is tracks. We can just rent tracks. Running cross country on tracks, though, is like 12 and a half laps for a race. So it's super boring and not anything like a scenic cross country race that I enjoyed when I was in high school. But it's what we can arrange quickly. And in a matter of 2 weeks, all the ADs from all the schools arranged a number of tracks, and we have a season all of a sudden. So where we're going to have like 6 or 7 meets. So pretty exciting, actually. But yeah, they're all on tracks. So one of the things I was realizing is that we like to have a lot of runners in our races. We like to run a lot of kids together, which means tracking, paying attention to who has run 12 and a half laps is going to be super rough. Paying attention to the leader, no problem. Paying attention to your last runners, probably not a problem, because you know they're last and you know how many times the leader passed them. But paying attention to those people in the middle, that's really hard. Like, okay, did they get lapped once or twice, or how many times did they get lapped? As coach, unless you have like a checklist where you're checking people off as they go through, it's really hard to remember. So, and I don't trust myself to do this. So there's no way I'm going to trust the other coaches to keep track of this. The coaches in our league are great. I don't trust them for accuracy, but they're great. Let me say that. They're good coaches. They're great people to work with.
Sorry, I'm laughing because the statement, if I can't do it, I don't trust them to do it, definitely gives you the idea that, yeah, you definitely don't trust them being accurate.
But, they're great people to work with. They coach their runners well, at least from what I can tell. I like working with them. So in thinking about this, I was like, here's what we do. We have a chip system. We lay the chip system down in lane 1 and 2 at the finish line. We have all the runners run over it for every lap. This will be great. So we got this chip system a while back, and the chip system is great, but it came with all PC software, and I didn't want to deal with PC software because I'm a Mac guy. I hope that's been obvious already. So I didn't want to deal with PC software. I just didn't want to deal with it at all. I said, all right. So I took a look at what the chip system outputs, and it outputs a whole big text file of results. It's basically outputs the time of day and the chip that passed over it. So then with simple subtraction, you can figure out when they started, subtracting the time of day of the start from the time of day when they finished, you can find out their overall time. So that's how it works. Mm-hmm. Pretty simple stuff. But of course, the way the chip system works is when somebody runs over the mat, they don't leave one time. They leave 6 to 8 times because it just keeps reading the chip as it's going over. It reads it about 6 to 8 times as it passes over the mat. So each runner creates a whole mess of lines in the file. So if we want to make sure that all the runners are running 12.5 laps, we're going to have the chip mats in lane 1 and 2 at the finish line, and they'll have to run over them all 12.5 laps.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to make a really long file because not only do we have a lot of people in the race, but we're going to have a lot of people in the race running over it 13 times. So it's going to create a really large file. So I took a look at my homegrown system, and I had already set up my system for this way back when we got it because the PE department wanted to measure laps. So I had my database that I had built set up to measure laps. So I was pretty pleased. I didn't have to do too much programming to get to work for our current situation. It was already set up. What I did mostly was adjust it so that I could use it quickly and easily on meet day. My normal process was I import the file, and then since everybody only passes over the mat once, it goes in, calculates the overall time, I export it out of my parsing program, and then I import it into the results program. The results program then scores the meet, and I email that off to the coaches. So I didn't want to have too many more steps in this process, but one of the nice benefits too is if everybody runs over the mat every lap, I get nice splits on, these runners passed over here. And then coaches can take this data and then say, you slow down too much here, or you need to start slower or start faster or whatever. It gives a whole bunch of great data.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to import it into my system, and then I made the program calculate laps using the old code, modified slightly. Then I made a new button that exported out the final time from the laps, takes all their laps, looks at the final time, exports that out, and then that I import into the results system. So I needed a new export button, basically, is what I needed to export out only the final time, not all the other laps. That was pretty much the biggest change I made.
Okay.
So I took a look at it today. I haven't processed all the results from today yet. I've only processed one race, but it already was very helpful. I already found a runner who didn't run enough laps.
Mm-hmm.
He only ran 11.5 instead of 12.5. Well, one in each race did that. And one runner in the high school ran 13.5 laps. I just knocked his last lap off and we'll give him the time as 12.5 laps.
He just really wanted to keep running.
Yeah, he wanted to do another lap. It's great for him. I'll just not count that lap. But it means he probably could have had it slightly faster if he sprinted at the end there, but oh well. So yeah, that part has seemed to work. We'll probably have a few more runners in the race, but I think I'm going to need to tell coaches they need to have a manager somewhere near the finish line that's ticking off laps as they go by, because it's super hard to keep track of how many laps kids have. I'm going to need somebody like that. It worked pretty smoothly.
Sounds like it's going well.
It is not how I would have chosen to do a cross-country season, but it is better than not having a season.
So my next task, I'm going to say writing.
Oh, good one, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I've made a couple of allusions to writing here on the podcast.
Are they just illusions?
Allusions, not illusions.
Oh, okay. No, I'm glad you have written things.
Yes, I have written things occasionally. I have talked about writing things here and there on this podcast because as a side project for myself, I have been writing for many years. A lot of just small stories that I create and have built up worlds and have done things like that. Over the years, I have finished one novel that got a whole lot of rejection letters, and in my read through after those rejection letters, I realized exactly that they were all correct and I needed to revise everything. But I digress. For me, I just enjoy writing. Even if I never actually got anything published, I really enjoy the act of creating stories, of thinking about what a character would do in this situation, of creating a world that is very unlike our own or potentially very like our own, but with slight twists. I enjoy doing that. And like I said, even if I never got anything published or I never had anyone else read it, for me, it is incredibly fun to think and just tell a story. I mean, it's the same thing. That same desire to tell a story is also fed in ways like through D&D, where you're sitting around with your friends and communally telling a story. This is just one where I have complete control over it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I just love getting a chance to write, thinking about what is the best way I can word this to express what this person is feeling, what this person is thinking, and come up with a story. Yeah, that'd be what I'd say.
Yeah, sounds good. I do think it is interesting how we've all picked chosen tasks, which is good.
Yeah, I did not pick any tasks that have been assigned to me.
Mm-hmm.
I should have picked some of the tasks that my boss has assigned to me that were just so aggravating that I just had to talk about.
A student absence system, you know.
Hey, actually, I'm pretty darn proud of that thing.
Yeah, that's good.
It works. That's how proud I am.
I was thinking of doing the staff absence system because that was a very interesting assignment way back when. But anyway.
I think the staff absence system is great because I took pieces of it to make the class absence one. I don't know. I think the ones that really stick in our minds are the ones that we choose for ourselves or that somebody has chosen for us to the point where we take ownership of it.
Well, and I think that leads very well into the book we're going to talk about then. Way back on episode 18, which is almost 10 episodes ago now.
Yeah, almost.
We talked about A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is book 1 of the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers. And I think I had mentioned in that episode back then that this is a great book. And when I was reading it, I had heard that the second book was better. And I was like, wow, how can that be? And I finally read the second book and I was like, wow, yes, I believe the second book is better. So I wanted to get to this point. Neither of us have read the third book yet, so I am looking forward to that. But I wanted to get to at least this point with Ryan and introduce him to the second book. So I had him read A Closed and Common Orbit, which is the second book in the Becky Chambers Wayfarer series. So please do read it yourself because I hope you've read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet with us because that is a great book. I thought it was excellent. And then please go read A Closed and Common Orbit because, yes, it is a great book. And in my opinion, hopefully you enjoy it too, but I liked it a lot.
Before anything else, let's first say that if you have not read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, first go ahead and read that, and then listen to episode 18. And then after that, go ahead and read this book, A Closed and Common Orbit, and continue after this. However, if you have already read them, again, as always, I'm here to provide you with a short little summary. So, at the end of the previous book, Lovelace is put into a body kit and leaves the ship with Pepper and goes to live with her. The story then follows the parallel story of Pepper and Sidra, who is Lovelace's name that she chose for herself. Pepper, who was originally called Jane 23, a human who was created for the purpose of working in a factory cleaning parts, she, as a child, escapes from the factory, where she then finds a shuttle, and she lives out the next 9 years of her life trying to find a way off that planet. During that time, she's raised by an AI named Owl. Many years later, but also being told throughout the same time in the book, Sidra is the AI who was formerly known as Lovelace. She was taken in by Pepper, and her part of the story is largely how she becomes accustomed to living among society, but also in living in a kit as a sentient being without revealing what she is, because what she is in effect illegal. Her very existence is illegal. The two stories continue being told parallel throughout the entire book, but eventually come to join each other when Pepper finds the shuttle that she originally escaped from the planet being held in a museum. Then Pepper, along with her partner Blue, and Tack, a friend of Sidra, all decide to go to the museum that the shuttle is held in to rescue Owl. They tell Sidra that she can't come with, but she does smuggle herself aboard the shuttle and come with anyway. Eventually, they find the shuttle, and Sidra decides that the best way to break Owl out is a very dangerous process of actually taking her AI core programming and putting it into the body kit that she herself is also in, while creating a lattice to separate the two. This works, and she eventually goes back to the shuttle on which they had both escaped, and puts Owl into the shuttle as they escape from the planet without getting caught. When they arrive back at home, Owl is put into an AI that runs throughout the building that Sidra decides to open as a bar, and they live and work together in a community of the chosen family that they decided on.
So, Ryan, what did you think?
I loved it.
I didn't build this up too much for you?
No, you did not build it up too much. I loved it. I thought it was excellent. I was a huge fan of this. I thought that the world building and the character development that Becky Chambers did in the first book, I felt like they were good.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like this just blew it out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The characters are well developed, and everything about this story was just, it hit all the notes perfectly, in my opinion.
Yep, I think so too. I have a few small questions.
Sure.
One of them was, I think they say this pretty outright. Again, we both listened to this as an audiobook, but I'm pretty sure I must have missed it in the first listening. But I think I realized halfway through the book the first time I listened to it that Jane 23 was Pepper. And it's clear, it's clear now in the second reading that before you even meet Jane 23 that they're telling you that this is Pepper. But I missed it the first time, and it didn't hit me until a lot later. I was like, oh my goodness, Jane 23 was Pepper. Did you pick it up right away, or did the realization?
I picked it up right away.
There's a sentence or two that just say it outright.
For me, I just kind of assumed it because, you hear about, especially in the first book, in A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, you hear about Pepper. You hear about, the fact that she doesn't have any hair because she was created in that way to serve that purpose.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that too then. Mm-hmm.
And so it had told you about who she was and why she was the way she was. And then when it shifts to this small girl living in basically the exact same situation that was being described as what Pepper was, at least at the beginning of the book, I assumed that if 23 wasn't Pepper, it was somebody who knew Pepper and was going to come to meet her very soon.
Well, so here's one of the questions then, too. Do you think all of the Janes looked the same?
Probably not.
Yeah, I wonder, because they do mention later that they are clones.
Well, even if they are clones, one of the things that they actually mentioned in this story was that Blue mentions, for example, that DNA doesn't always do exactly what they intended to do. So even if they clone them, I think there might have been some... they might have been very, very close, but I don't think they were probably identical because, if nothing else...
Well, they could tell each other apart. Now, not to say that clones that all looked the same probably still couldn't tell each other apart.
Yeah.
But, and even if they are clones, somebody that's a Jane could look the same as somebody that's a Stacy, could look the same as somebody that's in one of the other names, I forget, but anyway, or in one of the other age groups. Jane 23 could be cloned off of Stacy 23, which could be cloned off of whatever, right?
That could be a possibility, but, the other possibility is that all of them are essentially the same, but just because they were born in a different age group. they had a different name.
Yeah, I mean, they don't touch on the whole cloning thing, but that was a big thing in the previous book. So she doesn't touch on it, but you can feel the weight of it. If they had gone that way, it would have been really rough for Pepper and Blue.
Yeah, and I'm also very curious on how she worked out the legality things to get herself in a position that is at least where she is in society now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even because Blue and Pepper ran away, did they even finish their GC paperwork? Or did it just stall out there? And maybe it did.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think it stalled out because they ran away before it finished.
And I don't think they ever felt the need to pick it up again, it doesn't sound like. Sound like they're okay where they are.
Either they never picked it up again, or they worked through some back channels to get it done quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that from Pepper.
One of my favorite lines in this one was the pretty solid academic nonsense. That was one of my favorite lines.
Sounds like pretty solid academic nonsense. You know, as somebody who spent a large number of years writing papers that probably were filled with pretty smart sounding academic nonsense.
Oh yeah, we're going to look at human history by looking at the different kinds of ships they had over time. Oh, well, no, it wasn't history. They were looking at poverty.
It was looking at the disparities between economic groups within human history based upon fuel usage and...
Yes, that's right. I think that's what it was. Oh, it was pretty great.
I mean, it makes sense if you think about it in the broad spectrum of things, but... Because it actually sounds like something that would be researched, actually.
Yep, pretty solid academic nonsense.
Hey, I would totally do that research. And then nothing would come about through that research. There were just so many interesting things that they did throughout the story. One of the things that stood out to me was, so there's one scene where Sidra's dancing, and somebody approaches her from behind.
This is a good scene.
And all of a sudden, like, all of her alerts go off. But the alerts are things like as if she was still in a ship.
Right. As if something snuck up on her and his ship
is about to collide.
Right, exactly.
And seeing that play out was very interesting because it dealt with everything as if her AI programming was still, your body is not a body, it's a ship. And so if something's approaching you, you're going to get a collision error message.
And in thinking about it, right, like if she wasn't able to change her code, I think this would have been the hardest thing for her to live with, right?
Oh, yeah.
I guess maybe lies would still be first, but this would be the second biggest thing then, perhaps. Not being able to adjust the intensity of these kind of alerts would be really rough. Humans have them, but we're able to adjust our intensity levels on how we react. And if she can't adjust that, that would be something that would hinder her ability to act as human.
Yeah. I wonder what the order of things that she fixed once she had access to those things.
Right, because she fixed everything in nanoseconds, probably.
Yeah. But also, the other side of things is, they never talked about that conversation. Because what happened was, she had Tack basically do the entering the actual code changes to allow her access to edit her code. But then, when Pepper found out, she basically freaked out that she had done that. And then they never actually talked about what that conversation looked like.
Yeah, that would have been a good one.
It would have been a good one, but I can understand why you would skip over it.
Yeah. Probably writing that conversation would take months, right? Because you need to make sure every detail's covered.
Well, yeah, and I think leaving it in the reader's imagination would have to be so much better than anything the author would feel like they would write.
Because otherwise, every reader will picture something that's missing. And you'll never be able to satisfy all the readers, where if you leave it in the reader's imagination, it can satisfy all the readers.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they talked about that. They must have. It is interesting. But yeah, that must have been a good conversation.
Because that would have to have been a good conversation for the amount of comfort with it that they ended up being at.
I almost wish they went into more detail. They went into some, but I wish they went into more detail about the people running the planet where Jane was born, right? I almost wish they went into more detail, almost so that we could more hate them, right? I mean, obviously they were played to be disliked, right? That's obvious.
Yeah, I would say that I felt like what they did tell was enough because that was how much Jane knew.
Mm-hmm.
Jane knew that they had created her for that purpose and that she was expendable.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, it felt like the second Hunger Games book where they're really giving you somebody to hate.
Yeah.
In that first district, because you just see it more and more that they're really laying it on.
Maybe she'll cover it in the third book.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think the third book is more about the Exitans. At least that's what the quick synopsis I read. Something happens in the Exitan fleet.
Ah.
So we'll go back to we're more humans.
More humans?
Yeah, we go back to humans.
Don't know how I feel about humans.
I know. Well, even the Gaiists, right? Okay, so going back to... So we've got these people who are gene tweaking and living it up on that planet where Jane was created. And then we've got Gaiists coming to that planet to reform them, which is interesting. Owl's expressions and sentiment toward them was, I found that humanizing, right? I mean, that's what we're supposed to, that's what we're supposed to feel, I think, is that we're supposed to feel that Owl can make attachments.
Yeah. So they talked a lot about, like, what makes a sentient being. They talked about that a lot through the previous book. They talked a lot about it through this book. I mean, at what point is it its own person? Because in this world, we've seen AIs aren't viewed as people. They aren't viewed as beings.
They're, property, which is why...
They're property.
It's okay that they take away Pepper's ship because it's just her property.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not allowed to have it because she's underage or whatever. So it's okay.
Didn't have a pilot license or something.
Yeah, it was a silly excuse, but still. And they're viewing it as property. They're not viewing it as a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting, too, is they obviously see her desire for her ship back because she continually enters into all the cargo bays.
Mm-hmm.
But they try to do nothing, right? Like, I just...
Yeah.
I frown at the stupidity of the captain in this case, who must realize what she's doing. She's looking for her ship. So the captain or the leader of this base has no compassion for that, none at all. Somebody who is a leader of a starship or a star base, realizing what compassion for a vehicle would be, like a person who's a leader of a star base would have been a pilot at some point or something. They would have taken ownership of some ship, and they felt ownership toward a ship, and they don't see this in this girl and try to help her out at all.
Well, not all captains can be a Picard.
Yeah, well, that's true. One of the things that hit me this time in the listen through was the similarity of the two stories. I mean, I could see it in the first one, of course, in my first read through. But in this read through, I think it was, to me, it felt a little more over the head. I hit over the head with it, bonk, bonk. Like, oh, yep. Jane 23 is going through adolescence. Sidra is going through adolescence. Jane 23 is going through a discovery of how important Owl is. Sidra is going through a discovery of how important Pepper is, right? Mm-hmm. It was they mirrored each other very closely.
Yeah.
But I think they, of course, didn't mirror each other in the same time scale. I mean, Jane 23 didn't realize how important Owl was to her until she had to crawl back to the ship over a span of a day or so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, too bad they don't explain some of that either. Because, I'm just surprised she didn't get eaten by dogs on the way back still. And not the dogs that were sitting there, it's just other dogs in general. With all the blood that was probably leaking out of her. But I'm glad she did. But then listening to Sidra's adolescence and try to discover herself at the same time, like they were very similar. Anyway, I thought that was interesting.
I thought it was interesting, but I felt like it really came full circle when you had that final scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because the final scene basically ended with Pepper telling Sidra that she was proud of her, and then Owl telling Pepper that she was proud of her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Basically, both parental type roles, basically affirming the one they were raising's existence.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I liked how cyclical it was because you have Pepper, who was raised by an AI, who is effectively now raising an AI.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep, I do think that was fun.
So I thought that was appropriate.
I think one of the things that I liked about this book, too, was that it was true to the scenarios that it put people in.
Mm.
Like, I really liked the Jane and Owl learning together. They're learning together. Owl's learning how to be a mother, and Jane is learning everything else about the universe. I loved how, like, oh yeah, of course Jane doesn't know all of these words because she's not in school 8 hours a day. She's in a factory 8 hours a day. She has some learning time, but of course what they're teaching her in learning time is how to work the machines in the factory. She's not going to learn planets or any weather. They just strip her of all of that knowledge and keep her on just simple, basic facts. But she's got to learn it all, and Owl has to learn how to teach it all and learn how to be a non-annoying parent, how to give teenagers space. I need my space.
How does one give a teenager
I
space?
don't know yet. I haven't gotten there. It's going to happen pretty soon, though, I think. At least I hope not. I loved the story of them learning together, and then it'd be mirrored again in Sidra's experience. I think I liked the Jane story better in that particular case.
Mm-hmm.
Sidra's, of course, I mean, with her alarms and things, it's like, oh, of course she's going to have these things. So it was true to itself, right? So I did like that.
Other thing I would actually bring up is the fact that there's a very big similarity that I see in the things that Becky Chambers chooses to write, at least based on these two books that I've read from her.
Mm-hmm.
Because in both of these stories, I find that the thing that she always brings up, that she always hammers home, is the importance of the family that you choose.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because in both Sidra and Pepper's lives, there are certain people they chose to basically make their family.
Right.
Blue, Owl, Sidra. For Sidra, it would include Tack, which I think probably by the end, for Pepper and Blue, they would probably have included Tack as well, after everything that they've gone through.
And at the minimum, a close family friend, right?
Yeah, at minimum, a close family friend. Then I think back to the previous book, which was all about that chosen family,
Right.
all about the family that you decide to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that emphasis on the family that is most important is that one that you choose for yourself.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was obvious because Jane had, for things to work, she had to choose Owl.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, she could have just as easily not chosen Owl and just chosen something else. I mean, it would have been suicide probably, but I'm not sure she would have realized that. I think she probably would have, if she had decided to not choose Owl as a guardian, as a helper, it would have been probably her death. But I think she still could have made that choice, even just out of fear for what happened to Jane 64.
I mean, even if Jane hadn't picked Owl necessarily as her family, because when she got older, she could have chosen not to chase after Owl. But the thing is, you noticed one of the things that people talked about in the picnic, the chat log, was that she would ask basically every week if anybody had seen the shuttle. She had been looking for years for Owl. It was the fact that she, even after it was no longer just for her own self-preservation, she continued to choose and seek after Owl. I would also say that the more I think about it, I'm trying to remember where the line is specifically, but one of the characters talk about how the extent of history of all races involves the oppression and the degradation of the other, the one that they view as lesser. And there are definite parallels to think about with the story of humanity. Because, I mean, you think about how humans act in day-to-day life, and many times it is, even if it's not oppressing or putting one down, we think about the fact that so many times in society it becomes an us versus them, and you make the them something lesser, so it's not as bad when you degrade them because they don't know better. They are not educated. They're not like us. Whatever reason people put, it makes the other lesser. And in this case, they use that analog with AIs.
But almost, I'm wondering, with hearing what we heard in A Long Way to a Small Younger Planet and now this book, I almost think humans, well, all of them, I guess, it seems like all species, they obviously think of AIs as lesser, but it's almost because they don't know better. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's not because they're like...
And that's the thing is, in most cases, it's not a vicious thing. It's not something that's done on purpose. It's something that you've convinced yourself that is true, or it's a unconscious thought. That's how it becomes true. In many cases, in this case, actually, it would be a collective unconscious thought.
Yes.
Where the collective thinks this thing, and society thinks this thing, so it must be true.
Right. Whereas if they got to know an AI, really did, built relationships in some way, then they would know, they're, not necessarily equal, but at least deserving of more rights. More rights than being unplugged, anyway.
Not even just being unplugged. I mean, having something written into your program where being overwritten is normal, is okay.
Yeah. That was a great scene, isn't it?
The only reason I brought up the us and the them and the collective unconscious idea is the fact that, I mean, like I said, we see it in society, we see it in our world, maybe in a broad spectrum of ways, in whatever way we want to make a us and a them, and the them becomes lesser. It's not even a thing that we do by choice sometimes. In many societies, the them is the societal accepted them, and that's how it becomes that lesser. Whatever that societally accepted them is. And this book expresses so beautifully that isn't right.
Yeah, it's not right to continue thinking of them lesser just because everyone else thinks them of.
Even if all of society thinks of something as less, it's not right. It needs that simple statement that should not be true needs to be said. That's what I wanted to say. There we go.
I think this is my one pet peeve of the book.
Okay.
That I actually don't really like the last chapter. There's a few things that bother me.
Is this the owl chapter?
Yes, the owl chapter.
Gotcha.
Where Sidra has now multiple cameras and they have memory banks in the basement. And Sidra has one of her camera animal things plugged into the linkings all the time. I think that one bothers me because I thought it was good that she learned to have to remember things, right? Like, otherwise she's going to be now in her bar. Somebody's going to ask her a question. She's going to be able to look it up on the linkings in half a second. And they're like, wow, you know that? And she's going to have to explain it, right? Or make some excuse. But I thought they were pretty firm on that. So it was a little saddening to me that we give up on it in the last chapter.
They didn't, though. I mean, yes, they had those things, but she had set up certain rules. Like, yes, she's hooked in, but she has to basically, if somebody's asking her something, she had basically how else to put it than a Google Glass. She had that, and that she wrote into her own program that she would be looking it up.
Oh, okay, right. Okay.
They did mention that.
I think I do like the animals. I think I like the fact that the animals were cameras because that does satisfy one of her core needs, or one of her core tenets in her previous thing was that she has multiple cameras all looking around so they can see everywhere. So I think having the animals, is a perfect example of how to solve the problem that she had.
Yeah, I felt like because of that, she was able to split herself into those multiple things because it was a private network. And I think that's the key there and why they allowed it, because it remained in a private network.
Right, so it couldn't be hacked or visited by somebody who they didn't want to.
And also, when she left, she had to disconnect from that network. So if she went out to a bar, for example, or a party, she would have to not be on that network.
Yeah, I see where you're explaining it, but to me it still subtracts just a little bit from the story. I liked just a little bit. Not enough to hinder or anything, because again, the book was excellent, but
at least where I was and how I was reading it, I felt like it was okay, simply because, first of all, she had gotten to the point where she was setting up her own bar. She was inviting people into this house. So she was, at that point, interacting with society that much. So you take that mixed with the fact that, yes, she had access to these animals, which were all cameras, and also access to that link, but she did have the specific code that she wrote into herself that she was only able to answer questions via putting on the lens, basically, and then answering those questions. I think it was enough for me to go, okay, I like this, especially given that I felt like the last chapter, the main thrust of it was to build up to that last statement of both parent figures saying that they were proud. And I felt like that build up was the more important thing than necessarily the parents caving in on allowing those things. I will say, potentially, one of the reasons that might be the cave was it was a year after the heist, and potentially with Owl being there, that might have caused Pepper to relax a few things based on what Owl potentially had talked to Pepper about. That's at least how I'm...
Yeah, I mean, an Owl can be an advocate on Sidra behalf.
Yeah.
Somebody that can hold Sidra accountable as well.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where I'm at least... That's my...
Headcanon?
My headcanon. Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to think of what I wanted to say, but yeah, headcanon.
All right, so the big theme of this book...
All right, big theme.
To me seems definitely like purpose, right? Like, choose for yourself your purpose in life, actually, and you can almost mirror it to that Joshua 24 verse, choose who you will serve. But that feels like the big theme here. Are you going to choose... Pepper had a task, right? And she lived by tasks. Well, I mean, Jane had a task. She lived by task. Then when she moved in with Owl, she had a task. But she still decided to hold on to her fixing things task. Probably because it was encoded in her DNA. But still, she chose to continue it on even after she left the factories. She just took it her own direction. And Sidra, of course, was fighting her purpose a lot of the time, but decided that her purpose could be mutable into many different things. I liked that theme. I think it was a really good theme.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would agree. I think also the fact that what Sidra said at the build-up to the final scene of the heist, that all races are defined by their need for some greater purpose. They would make something for something. And the fact that AIs were made by those people meant that there was some part of them that also felt like they needed to have a reason to exist, a purpose, something to aim for. I thought that build-up, that explanation was wonderful. I will say that statements like that do tend to make me a little introspective, where I think a lot about what does it mean to have a purpose and what would I define as my purpose.
Yeah, I like that. It gets you to think about that too, right? What are you writing in your purpose text field?
I think the thing is, art reflects life. And when a well-written book like this comes about, I think the natural response is to think about this message in the aspect of your own life. So what is it that I am writing into that purpose field?
And is it... I almost like that Sidra picked a purpose so specific to be like, help restore Owl to, help restore Jane and Owl together, right? Like, she knew that's a short-term purpose. Like, that's a 3-4 day purpose. But she wrote it in anyway. Like,
it's mutable.
Going back to theme goals, it's not even a quarterly theme. It's like, this is my theme for the week. So I kind of like that. Like, she moved... We're trained to do year-long resolutions, but she chose right away that she could have a shorter resolution. And I like that. I mean, that's fine. No problem.
I thought that was a very good choice.
I really liked this book. This is one of my favorite books now, I think.
I thought it was absolutely excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved reading it. It read so quickly simply because I didn't want to stop reading it.
I think everyone should be reading this. I am very curious as to where the third book is going.
Yeah.
I think it goes different places. So it doesn't follow direct after this book like A Long Way to a Small and Eager Planet does. The third book seems to go somewhere else. So I'm very curious if we even run into characters that are the same. So I've read the first, because I got the third book as an ebook, I read the first chapter and then I just don't read books, so I didn't move on. Well, and the other weird thing was, after listening to A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and then listening to A Close and Common Orbit, and then finally reading the words Aeluan and Andrisk and things like that, I was like, whoa, that's what these words look like. Okay, quite different
than how you were imagining it.
I don't think I just ever sat down to think about what those words would be spelled like. So seeing them for the first time was quite interesting.
Well, we'll have to give it a shot for another episode.
I think so. I think so.
So next week, I am going to be challenging Nate and having him watch a movie that I saw in theaters a while back. It just came out to home release, and I'm very much looking forward to having Nate watch it. It's called Weathering with You. It is made by the same director who made Your Name.
Which we both brought to the table back in episode 2.
Your Name was episode 2, so this will be a good thing to bring, I thought.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it, because I liked Your Name.
And I felt like this was right up there with that. And we'll talk about that in 2 weeks' time.
Sounds good. I think one of the things we should do, so iOS 14 came out 2 weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let me ask you this question, because I haven't asked you this question yet. Have you decided to use the new app library feature or widgets to rearrange your home screen yet?
I have not updated my phone yet.
Oh, you haven't even updated your phone yet? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was delaying to see whether or not there was going to be a lot of issues before I fully updated. I know they run through the beta, but I still wanted to wait a little bit.
I waited a few days, maybe even a week before I did it. And since nobody was complaining...
When did it come out? Didn't it only come out like 2 weeks ago?
A little more, I think.
Oh, okay. I don't know how time works, apparently.
Well, things go pretty quickly in this month.
This month has been a little crazy. Yeah, no. Yeah, I have not downloaded it yet.
I guess maybe it's been 2 weeks. So maybe I've only had it on my phone for a week.
September 16th.
Okay, yeah.
So basically about 2.5 weeks now.
All right, so I have a little bit of homework then to install it if you feel like you can.
Yeah, no, I do. I didn't hear anything bad, so I was going to install it this week.
Because I think now I feel like, podcasts and all, they like show pictures of their home screen to everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I took the approach one time, I think CG Gray mentioned this, and I took this approach, and he's, of course, changed his philosophy since then, but I liked the one he mentioned a few years ago now, where he said he tries to make only one screen of apps, and then everything else be in folders or something. But even all the apps had to be in folders in that first screen. And I liked that. For me, that worked. But now I feel with the app library, I can finally get there. So I have rearranged my home screen and used widgets. So I think we should finally do now a home screen sharing episode.
All right, I can do that.
But you'd have to get iOS 14 first.
Well, I give you my word as a Spaniard.
That doesn't work. I've known too many Spaniards. Plus, you're not a Spaniard.
You're right on both counts. Thank you for the Princess Bride reference, and thank you for recognizing that. Yeah. Anyway.
Your red hair is giving it away.
I have hair?
Well, when you had hair.
When I had hair. I will download it this week. Actually, here. It is downloading right now.
You're going to update your phone live on an episode.
I'm updating my phone right now.
Ooh, you're living on the edge.
Because I'm not using it during this podcast.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
My mind is going crazy right now. So, I was finishing up the summary for the book. And for some crazy reason, my mind is blanking on names of the characters.
Pepper, Blue. Tack. Sidra.
Okay.
Owl.
I think that's all the main ones that I need.
64.
Yeah. Pepper was, how would you describe, she's a genetically altered human, basically.
Mm-hmm. Tweaked,
but she wasn't tweaked. She was created for that purpose. That's the hard thing to describe her as.
Right. We should probably move on. Since we've done like an hour of beginning topics.
Yeah, I started recording an hour and a half ago.
We can be part of Coke Japan's taste testing group.
You know, there is a Coke near us.
As long as they don't give us the strawberry ones.
No, they'll just give us cinnamon. Oh, wait, no, that's Pepsi.
Who knows? Maybe they can do cinnamon better than Pepsi. Sorry. We'll find out soon.
We'll find out soon enough.
I was going to introduce the book. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. I did put a few bullet points in the show notes.
All right, I'll open it up.
I left them vague, though, so I'm not sure how much it helps. Maybe I left them...
Those are pretty vague.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, that's how I have my notes organized.
No worries.
Maybe let me put the bigger themes in. I have what is life and
what is
purpose.
Love? Baby, don't hurt me.
Porpoise.
Don't hurt me.
Purpose. Like that.
No more. What is love?
Mm-hmm. There we go. So those are the bigger themes I have.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll save those to the end, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll introduce this book. All right, so we read. Oh goodness, when did we do the last one? Stink. My Hill to Die On. Scott says to me, "Man, you guys always have the episode number ready when you're like, oh yeah, we talked about this on episode whatever." I was like, Scott, that's because
It's through the magic of editing.
I say we pause for 2 minutes while we look it up, and then we say the number once we're done looking it up.
Here's the thing: what he doesn't realize is the fact that we record for about 2.5 hours to get an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half.
The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet was
episode
number opening. The page is opening. Number 18.
You know, we should have talked about themes.
Oh, yeah, that could have been good too. Yeah.
Too late now.
Anyway.
Yeah, I can tell you right now that I won't say that I've failed at my theme, but I've definitely forgotten to be reflecting on my theme. So I feel like I have not been doing enough towards my theme now. I think, now to be completely fair, I did decide on a theme around the time that COVID started.
Yeah.
So that did kind of throw a wrench in things. Details.
Yep, we can airdrop these files to I think let's airdrop them to each other so that as backups, right?
Yeah.
Because normally what I do is I upload these to my server and then they're automatically backed up. So I feel a little scared not having them backed up other places.
If we both have it, then, we have two, which means we have one.
Exactly. Well, we'll have my time machine backup of this computer. Oh, no, I don't, because my computers can't back up the time machine without my server. Oh, my God.
Oh, what are you going to do?
Oh, Crash Plan. Crash Plan is still working.
Crash Plan is still working.